What's up, guys? Welcome into a Week 13 edition of Chargers Weekly. Bolts 6-5, coming off a loss to the Denver Broncos. Cincinnati on deck. Here with Matt Money Smith. And, Buddy, before we get into the Bengals, let's just look back for a minute at this Denver game. You know, I wrote a bunch of things down. The pressure on Justin Herbert. I think some inopportune calls in the first half. The backs of Denver. What would you point to as the biggest reason the Bolts are now 6-5?
Well, I think there's a few things. Number one, you mentioned it, the pressure, the fact that, you know, you're already down Ibushi, and you're trying to help out that right side of the line. And then Filer goes down, you know, and that was the good thing about drafting Slater and signing Filer and Lindsey is that left side of the line was freaking a brick wall. It has been so good all season. So you can help Storm. You can help out Schofield a little bit, you know, with Lindsey, maybe if Filer and Slater can take care of their business over there. But when you got two guards, you know, and Calameti and Schofield that are supposed to be depth pieces and they're going up against, you know, a Vic Fangio coach defense, you better believe he's going to figure it out. And he's going to find Waldo, and man, did he find him, you know, 19. And look, when you're Herbert and you have the type of athleticism he does, you're fine with edge pressure. I mean, you're not fine with it, but we saw it last year, right? He was one of the most pressured quarterbacks in the league, and you can peel off. You know, you can see that edge rusher coming and peel off the other way, and he's so good on the, you know, throwing on the run. In this case, it was just coming straight up the gut. I mean, the guy was taking the snap, and the pressure was in his lap immediately. So that's got to get fixed. You know, and I don't know if you know, obviously it gets fixed if Filer's back. If he's not, you know, I hate saying this, but it's like there's a reason why Calameti's been in the league as long as he has, and he's stopped at as many places as he has, and he doesn't have a lot of snaps on his resume. You know, he's there to spell, and he's there to fill in like he did this past week. But, you know, I am all for trying something till you find a solution. And I think if he's got to go out there again with Schofield, I think you're going to see a lot of the same things because Lindsley cannot help on both sides. He's got to pick a side, either help Sco or help Calameti, and this team is just going to attack the other side, whichever side Lindsley's not helping on. So I think that's where it starts. Two, drops continue to be an issue. I think it's very odd. It's never been that way.
Like 22 this year, like 22 drops.
I think they lead the league.
Yeah.
But even bigger than that, I think the one other thing I took away, Chris, is that Denver's really good. They're really good defensively. They're really good. I thought it was this. I thought they were the tightest windows that we've seen Herbert have to throw into all season. Mm-hmm. I know he burned Darby a couple times, but I thought Darby held his own for the most part. Fuller, you know, they have that rotation of Fuller and Darby and Surtain. And I'll tell you, man, I remember in the offseason, it felt like there was some heat around the Chargers and Fuller that they were trying to get a deal done with the Bears. And I don't know what happened because they just released the guy, but man, it sure would have been nice to have him on this team for some depth issues. So I think offensively, you know, they're moving the ball and they're just stalling out, and penalties killed them. I mean, killed them. You know, Herbert had how many 2nd and 19, 3rd and 15. It just seemed like, you know, anytime you got some momentum, there was a flag on the ground. And I know I'm rambling now just because it's all sort of coming back to me here. And then I think, you know, the other problem was defense again. You know, you got them especially, you know, in the second half, you got them in these disadvantageous 3rd downs and longs, and they were letting them convert.
Yeah.
You know, so I think you got a lot of stuff I think you got to clean up. But at the same time, it's a 1-score game, and in the middle 8, they got a chance to tie that thing up thanks to Derwin's interception at the end of the half. I think they tie it up, and then they're like, okay, we got past it. We're rolling now. We're good. Instead, I think they had the football for 13 minutes of the 3rd quarter and scored 0 points.
Yeah. One, Filer, I think we realize how valuable he is to this offense. He had played 100% of the offensive snaps. Ibushi too. But you know, the way that Filer has played this year, had not missed a snap going into that Denver game. You certainly saw his loss. Money, I almost think that this game was lost in the first quarter because, you know, time of possession has been an issue for this team. It all evened out at the end of the day, but that first quarter, the blueprint was keep Justin Herbert off the field, sustain drives, and score points. And they go up, they go 14-0.
Yeah.
And it's too late at that point. You already have a 2-score lead, and you mentioned it. Once you do get time of possession, you don't score any points. Another takeaway, Derwin James was the best football player on the field.
No question.
He was unbelievable in that game. And there's no chance they're even in that game if he doesn't play the way he plays. I mean, some of these hits on Javonte Williams, and there was another big one on, I don't know if it was Patrick or one of the receivers. The strip sack on Teddy Bridgewater that I thought was a fumble, no questions asked. I mean, the way that he played, man, if you could clone Derwin, I mean, my goodness, this team, I don't know. 33 to me, Money, he brings so much energy, and I wish that the rest of the defense could feed off of that and put together a performance to get them into playoff contention starting Sunday against the Bengals.
They're going to need to. I thought they played well. I thought for the most part, the defense played well. You know, the 14 points, remember, you flip the field. The defense gets the Broncos off. They defer. They hold, they get them off the field, and what do? You get a punt that's downed at the 1, and you nearly pick up that first down, but you can't, and now the field's flipped, right? And they're on their heels. So I thought the defense played well, and this, I think, goes back to something just to Derwin. He's going to be an all-pro this year. There's no question. He's the best safety in the league. But I think it goes back to something we discussed, I don't know, 5, 6, I don't know. I'm trying to figure out what game it was where I was like, why is Derwin not involved in 60% of the plays? But he's been closer to the ball. You know, I think they've made, it feels like they're really, you know, they are conscious and dedicated to having him closer to the ball to make more plays, to make those plays, you know, like a freaking missile drilling Teddy right in the middle of the back. And that's another part of this game too, is they had bad fumble luck. You know, Derwin hits Teddy and somehow it becomes an incomplete pass instead of a sack fumble, and Kaiser's running it into the end zone, or at least the Chargers have flipped the field on the plus side. The fumble, Joey, with the strip sack on 3rd down that should have forced a punt. Instead, the freaking ball fumbles forward, and that drive ends up continuing, and they get a score on it. Like, there was just too much of that, just bad sort of luck that went against them. The one thing I'll say about the D is, and we're also starting to see, is Joey getting kicked inside more and really getting more disruptive, where you're seeing him play in there. Linval's going to make a huge difference this week, and they need him. You know, I think, like you said, they were able to run the ball effectively. They were chewing off 5-6 yards, and I think that's to be understood with Denver. You know, there's a reason why that it's the only team with 2 backs that have 500 yards. And I think at the same time, the defense played. I don't think they not only played well enough to get a win, but I thought they dominated a pretty good chunk of that game, and the offense gave them nothing. You know, and I think that's the problem. Because, like, when you were talking about time of possession, that's what I was alluding to, is, it was completely lopsided in that first quarter, but they flipped it in the 3rd quarter, and they couldn't cash it in, you know, for any points. Like, you got a missed field goal from Hopkins, you know, and you've got a turnover on downs, and then you've got a turnover that should have at least been 3 points, and now you're looking at 14-10, you know, and instead it's a touchback pick to Surtain in the end zone on just a puzzling throw from Herbert, which we never see. You know, his interceptions tend to be, oh, that defensive back made a really good play. They're not, what the heck was that? And that was one of those interceptions. And, you know, who knows what was going on? Maybe it was just frustration from all the pressure, not to mention all the freaking penalties. They've got a 1st and goal, and now they get backed up again, and maybe there's a little frustration in there. But, like, that game was there for the taking. And I think that's what's so frustrating, is how this team is losing games. You know, what you look at their schedule, and I'm just trying to refresh my memory here because there's so many of them, you know, be it the Cowboys or the Vikings game. You look at these games. See, the Patriots and the Baltimore Ravens dominated them. But so it's the Vikings, the Broncos, and the Cowboys. Those 3 games, you're just like, there's just so many plays that could have been made. They're in that game. They're trading punches. What is going wrong with this team?
You're right. The time of possession. That's what the reason it's a 60-minute game, right? I mean, you can right the ship and you can make things happen in the second half. In the Chargers offense, and again, Money, we keep going back to the running game. Justin Herbert can't be the leading rusher 2 straight weeks. It just can't happen, especially December football. You have to be able to be physical and run the ball. And you alluded to it, the fact that you're down a guy like Filer, the right side of the line. There's a reason why you're not able to run the ball effectively, and they still really haven't identified a second running back. Bradwell was up, but he didn't have a carry. So,
which was very odd to me. They put him on the field, and the first snap he's on the field is pass pro, and he blows his blocking assignment. And then the second time he gets a pass out of the backfield, and it's like, man, that's hard. That dude's 240 pounds. He's a he's an F-150. Hand him the ball and let him run between the tackles. Let him run behind Rashawn Slater. Like, it was very odd that was his indoctrination to the offense. It's like, man, that's a tough ask for that dude who's been on the practice squad his entire career. And now all of a sudden he's got to pick up a Denver blitz, and that leads to a sack. And then his next one is a target on his shoulder that he's just clearly, that's just not his strength. So we'll see whether or not. I can't imagine he's going to be called up again. I would assume they want someone like Kelly out there, and maybe Roundtree, who's done a solid job in pass pro as well. But yeah, they have got to figure out a way to run the ball. They just have to be consistent. And maybe it's Justin Jackson. Maybe he's feeling a little bit more healthy and it can be him. But yes, 100%. They've got to balance this offense out.
And I think until they do, you just realize it's going to live and die on Justin's arm and maybe his legs right now. And just the drops, those need to be minimized. He needs to continue to find his playmakers with Keenan and Mike down the field. And, I'll say this, Austin is having a career season. He really is playing fantastic. He had that drop at the end of the game, but I mean,
that was thrown behind him and it was a little behind him.
Yeah. It was a little bit behind him.
That's a 50-50. That's on Herbert and that's on Austin a little bit, but I would put it more on Herbert based on, kind of how hot that thing was coming out and the placement of it.
But there's three dudes, I think, with 1,000 scrimmage yards and 10 plus touchdowns. It's like Mixon, Taylor, and Eckler, and two of those guys are going to be on the field together on Sunday. So let's stay on Austin just for a minute, because I think about this guy, a free agent, college free agent, 2017, what he's turned himself into. And maybe this would have happened last year, Money, had he not gotten hurt. But I mean, the way he plays, and I've said this so many times, it's probably ad nauseum. He's not a running back. He's an offensive weapon.
Yeah.
You put him anywhere. And he really is kind of the engine of this offense right now.
Yeah, I think it just kind of speaks to the position. There's a bunch of first round, running backs that don't pan out, second round, third round backs that don't pan out. And then you look around and just look at the 49ers, right? A team that relies on the run more than anyone. They draft Trey Sermon in the third round. All the fantasy football players get excited. All right, it's going to be my guy. And it's Elijah Moore. It's like, and that guy, I think, was either a 7th round pick or a free agent or something. Like, I think it's one of those positions where you can find Antonio Gibson for the Washington football team. You know what I mean? Like, you can find him in different spots. And I don't know why that's the case. Tony Pollard is outperforming Zeke this year for the Cowboys. It's just, you can find really good players either at the back end of the draft. I mean, now look, Austin's an exception when you're talking about doing something that hasn't been done since Marshall Faulk was in the league. That's a different deal. That's an exceptional player compared to a serviceable one. But just going to your point of Mixon, we're going to have two of these guys on the field. Dude's a nightmare. He's a complete nightmare. And the fact that Zach Taylor has finally built this offense around him instead of around Burrow, and Burrow is now a complement to Mixon. I wish he would have figured that out next week and not this week, not 2 weeks ago, because I think it just makes this offense freaking lethal and an absolute nightmare to contend with.
We're going to have Paul Dehner Jr. break down this matchup and give us a little bit more insight on the Bengals. And let's just flip it to Cincinnati. I mean, this is the first time we see Burrow versus Herbert. I thought that this was going to be the flex game. I guess in the end, NBC's probably happy with the first place matchup in the AFC West with the Broncos and Chiefs. But this game, Money, I know you're high on this Bengals defense. They've been playing really well. You hear the stars, the flashy names like Burrow and Jamar Chase and Mixon, but that defense is a big reason why they're playing so good right now.
They're really good. And a lot of people talk about, the Bengals are underrated and no one's talking about Joe Mixon. Yeah, they are. They're talking about, maybe Tyler Boyd doesn't get the run he should get because he's a really good player. But there's enough.
Buddy, Staley said, if he's underrated, that's a mistake.
I didn't get the memo. Yeah, I didn't. Everybody knows Mixon's a freak, a complete freak. of a player. And look, he would have been a top 15 pick, had he not punched a woman in the face in Oklahoma. Obviously, it was character concerns that had him slide, and yet he was still drafted in the second round after that because of how talented he is. And I should say, having mentioned that, kudos to him for moving forward and trying to do the right thing, addressing it, and being a good member of the community in Cincinnati and trying to help out, those that have suffered those sort of incidents and use that as a learning tool for him and for other players to see moving forward, that it is important to give back and atone for your mistakes in the past if somebody's, gracious enough to give you a second chance. So I want to make sure I balance that out. But just going back to the football side of things, on the defense, nobody's talking about him, and I can't quite figure out why. And there's kind of there's a bunch of names that you can kind of mention, but I think the one that never gets mentioned is Jesse Bates and how good he is at safety. Yeah. He's going to end up being a Pro Bowler. He's got a shot maybe to be an All-Pro. He's really good, and you combine. Look, when you always talk about how good is a defense, well, are the front and the back connected, and it feels like this defense is starting to get connected. You're starting to see those turnovers. You're starting to see them shut down offenses. They really got after freaking Roethlisberger. I mean, they got after his, and look, that was a Steelers team. And yeah, it drove me crazy. And now I'm on a tangent here.
Keep going.
Just all the people that were like, oh, Ben's playing his best football. Do you see that game? And they scored 34 points. It's like, wait a minute. They had scoring drives of 3 yards, 7 yards, and 11 yards. Yeah. It was all turnovers. He was not playing great. Those balls were hanging up in the air forever, but that's beside the point. But yes, to your point, DJ Reader was, I feel like Reader was, I think it was when he was in Houston 2 years ago when he wrecked the Chargers. Like he just wrecked that game. So I want to say it was 2 years ago. He was in Houston and just destroyed Phillip Rivers in that Houston game that they ended up winning with Deshaun Watson. Yeah, it was a home game, and the Texans ended up winning. And I just remember Anthony Lynn with kind of this sort of backhanded, sort of criticism. He was like, well, when you got a quarterback like that can run around, you can do a lot of things on offense. I was just like, dude. But Reader really wrecked the game. So he's a really good player. Ogunjobi's having an awesome year since they signed him from Cleveland. Hendrickson has been one of the best pass rushers in the league. And, that's where it all starts. The back end has kind of been pieced together. I've never been a big Eli Apple fan, but whatever. Awuzie is a really good player that they signed away from Dallas. And I think Bates is kind of the guy that really gets that thing going. So it's going to be a tough assignment, but I think there's plays out there. I do. I think there are plays to be made, and you can put points up on this defense. And I would be more surprised if the Bengals defense was able to shut down the Chargers offense than if we find ourselves in a shootout. To me, that's just kind of how this one is feeling.
Yeah. And then, offensively, we mentioned Joe Mixon and him kind of being the guy it starts with. But these pass catchers like Jamar Chase, I think he was pretty cool in against the Steelers, but like T. Higgins, man, Boyd, the tight end. There's so many different guys that Burrow can make. Uzama. There's so many guys that Burrow can make a star for that specific game. And, I look at the Chargers secondary right now, and we don't know about Asante Samuel Jr. as we tape this, probably not looking great. Noah Lohi-Gilman this week. So the secondary is a little bit thin right now, and you just wonder.
They had to go to the waiver wire. It's so thin they had to go to waivers. And I think, look, that's the issue. If you got a Waldo out there and a team addresses it and attacks it repeatedly, then it's just very hard to overcome. And look, Tavon Campbell's been, I think, a good player, a good depth piece, but when he's got to play 3 and 4 games in every snap, that's a big ask. That is just a big ask, and teams are going after him. And I'm sure we'll see the same thing if he's going to be the guy that's opposite Mike Davis, and Chris Harris is going to stay inside. And I'm sure that's why they addressed it, by scooping up a player that I will not be the least bit surprised to see get a pretty good chunk of snap percentage, since he's familiar with Staley's scheme, and just kind of knows what his assignments are, what the verbiage is. And where, and he's able to go out there and be effective. At the very least, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a shot. I'll say this, though, real quick. the thing to remember is while this offense is putting up a bunch of points, Burrow's thrown 12 picks. He's been sacked 30 times. So there's plays to be made. There are plays to be made out there. When you're throwing over an interception a game, you got an opportunity to go get after it. So, that's that. And when you got players like Derwin James on the back end and Bosa up front, that line's been leaky. So 30 sacks, that's a lot of sacks, so that's like 10 more than the Chargers have. And it feels like Herbert's taken a lot of sacks. So there's plays to be made against this offense.
I know you remember the Bills game last year and the just havoc that Bosa wreaked in that game. That needs to be like a carbon copy this Sunday. Like Bosa, I think, is the key to this game for the way he stops the run and the way he gets after the quarterback. And, DJ was breaking down Burrow and Bosa on Film Room this week. And we see that Derwin strip sack coming in like a heat-seeking missile.
Yeah.
Joey Bosa made that play. I mean, Joey Bosa was the reason Derwin James got in there so quickly. So, Joey's sack production isn't as high as we're maybe accustomed to seeing and not there with the top tier in the league right now. 7.5, but that doesn't really tell the story. He's got 4 strip sacks. He gets to the quarterback consistently. And Money, I think that he's the guy. He's going to have his elite all-pro type performance for the Chargers to win this game.
Yeah, you mentioned sacks, and I know, Brandon Staley's addressed this as well. It's not necessarily no. I mean, he leads the league in pressures. Joey does. So, and that's how you create, a quarterback to get his clock to speed up, to make mistakes. Other guys get either pressures or hits or a play to shut down. So, and I think what we've seen in the last 2 weeks too, Chris, is Joey's been very productive. He's much more productive these last 2 games than he has, I think at any other point in the season. So, and what we've seen is he's able to put his hand in the ground. They're pushing him inside a little bit. He's stacking up with Nwosu on the same side or Fackrell on the same side outside of him. And I think that's been a lot more effective. So I'm anxious to see if that's what we're going to see more of, especially in this game. Because that's what you do to young quarterbacks. Get to them fast. Don't give them time by coming off the edge. Get right up the gut and get right in their face. And, Burrow's an athlete, no doubt, but he ain't Lamar Jackson. He's not Jalen Hurts, guys that we've seen able to peel out of that when you get pressure right up the gut. And I think we're going to see a lot of that. I think you're going to see a lot of Derwin at the line of scrimmage, trying to take advantage of this offensive line that's given up 30 sacks and a quarterback that's thrown 12 picks. I think I will not be the least bit surprised if that's kind of the way they approach this, even though they have all those weapons on the outside. You know what? Don't give them time. Don't give them time to let Chase get down the field or Boyd to run a nice seam route, 15 yards in the middle of the field. Get to Burrow immediately, and let's just try to keep this thing from allowing those. T. Higgins is so good at 50-50 balls. That's the last thing you want is for those explosive plays down the field.
This is a much different Bengals team than the one the Chargers saw in week 1 last year. Let's get this week's opposing view. Paul Dehner Jr. of The Athletic does an awesome job covering the Bengals. He'll join us now. But first, a quick note to let you know that Pepsi, they're handing out the ultimate Chargers fan experience only at 7-Eleven. Rush in and scan the code for your chance to win some awesome Chargers prizes. You want to bolt up with Pepsi. No purchase necessary, must be 18 years or older. Sponsor is PepsiCo. For official rules, visit boltupla.com/7-Eleven. Also want to tell you guys about picks for Popeyes. Get this, every Chargers game this season, when the Bolts defense gets an interception, show your game recap email to your local Popeyes to get a free chicken sandwich when you purchase a chicken sandwich at regular menu price. All right, to get this week's opposing view, let's bring him in. Paul Dehner Jr. does a great job covering the Bengals at Cincinnati. And Paul, we've done this a couple of times over the last few years. Bengals got a really good football team, and this is a wild card vibe Sunday in Cincy.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt. It's all these teams that are kind of bunched together are all facing each other here, and this is one of those. I mean, Zach Taylor, the Bengals coach, kind of said I feel like it's the biggest game of the year for us when you consider where these two teams are stationed, what everyone is fighting for, what a loss could mean in both directions. And I think that's true. I mean, there's all these games down the stretch amongst these teams, these 5-6 teams, Denver, LA, Cincinnati, even Baltimore, who's up at the 1, is only 1 game ahead of the Bengals. So everybody kind of can end up anywhere right now in the AFC. And that's what makes, these stretch games feel so big every week.
Yeah, you look at the records, and head-to-head's going to be huge, right? They could end up with the same record if the Chargers win. Bengals can pull ahead by essentially 2.5 games because of the head-to-head here. But the one thing that really jumps out at me, Paul, is how we got here. Like how did the Bengals get to this point? As I was putting the board together to get ready for the game, it blew my dome how many new players are on this team. I mean, you've added like 5 defense. They went from like 6 to 11 defensive backs. There's a ton of waiver acquisitions. I mean, it feels like a full-on roster turnover on defense.
Yeah, 2 years in the making, really. I mean, when you go back, since Zach Taylor took over, they came in the first year and it was like kind of learning, what do we got? And they realized they have a trash heap. And so they gutted half of it, and there's still a lot left of sort of remaining, and it didn't quite mesh. And they learned a little bit more what they had to do. And they had a bunch of acquisitions in that offseason that almost all got hurt. Trey Waynes, who still has hardly played. DJ Reader got hurt. Joe Burrow, they draft. He makes it, 10 games into the season. They didn't feel like they really learned what it would look like when it came together. And then they did one last gutting, and it was really totally new. This is now Zach Taylor's team for the first year. His culture, his players, his type of guys, none of the like Marvin Lewis era holdovers who are like, why is this guy doing different? It was all about this new vibe and that they created. And before the season started, there was a sense of it all felt different that way, but it was okay. A lot of guys say that. You hear about that type of stuff when changeover happens. Then they started playing, and they started winning, and they started acting differently than you've seen Bengals teams act on the sideline, in reaction to each other, the way they are in the locker room, the way all of this stuff. It just was a much a different vibe that they kind of had sold since the very beginning. It just took 2 years to get here. You're right, though. It was all by going and acquiring guys with a past, a specific past, played on good teams, played on playoff teams, came from programs that won championships. They have all these LSU guys and these Clemson guys, a bunch of guys, Trey Henderson from New Orleans, Von Bell from New Orleans. Like they went and found guys that have that DNA to them, and they've built around them. And man, it has it certainly paid off in a big way.
Paul, they had some impressive wins early in the year, but they caught my attention after the Chargers got beat the way they did in Baltimore, and then for them to go in there and just destroy the Ravens, and then you sweep the Steelers. What is this team right now? Because they've outscored, I think, the Steelers and Raiders, 53-23 or something crazy over the last 2 weeks. But then you see losses to the Jets, losses to the Browns, that blowout last few weeks ago. Are they a different team the last 2 weeks? Are you seeing something different?
Yeah. I mean, really what they are is they have become this ownership of power running behind Joe Mixon being the initial engine. And, I think they went and they brought in a new offensive line coach, Frank Pollock, this offseason to fix that offensive line, which has just been a mess, and said, this guy is one of the best in the business at this wide zone running scheme. If we can, everywhere he's gone, he's had great running games. He's found the ability to develop them, including he was here in 2018, Joe Mixon's best year, not coincidentally. He left and went to the Jets for a couple of years. They brought him back. And the idea was that if he can do here what he has done most of his spots and reconnect with what he's already done with Joe Mixon, and that's the running game, and teams have to worry about that, and you just let Joe Burrow play off that, they're scary offensively with their weapons, with Jamar Chase and T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd. And it took them really about a half a season to get to that point where they felt like they could really lean heavy on it and really get everybody to connect that way. And what you've seen the last 2 weeks has been that flower blossoming. I mean, they have looked unstoppable. Mixon is just getting whatever he wants. They're blowing holes. The wide zone looks great. And the moment teams start trying to play single high with an extra player in the box and shade him towards Jamar Chase, because Jamar Chase has proven to be one of the best deep threats in the league, they throw balls to T. Higgins on the other side, and he plucks it off the top of the defensive back's head for a touchdown. Or Tyler Boyd just owns the slot as he does. And they're just getting all these matchups everywhere off of it. And it's really you seeing this young offense come together that way.
You know what I'm trying to figure out, Paul? Like the offense to me, the only concern I had going into the season was the O-line, and you just addressed that. You know, it looked like there were holes all over the place. That was discussed when they drafted Jamar Chase. But for me, it's the defense and kind of the remaking of that defense. Everyone's going to focus on the skill players because they're so good, and Burrow's so likable. But to me, the signing of Hendrickson, so two-part question. One, kind of what was the vibe in Cincinnati? Because nationally it felt like same old Bengals. They're cheap, letting Lawson go, and they're trying to go cheap with Hendrickson. He's been phenomenal. And two, have they changed their scheme? Have things changed a little bit in the way they're playing defense on top of all the personnel they've added?
I'll start with the Hendrickson thing. There was a lot of conversation about Lawson versus Hendrickson. They ended up both getting about the same contract. They let Lawson go. They liked the awareness and the finishing ability of Hendrickson. Lawson is a freak, and he is a great pass rusher. And it's a shame he got hurt again. But they felt like so many times he was so disruptive, but he didn't always finish for somebody who was in the backfield as much as he did. Hendrickson was the opposite. He always finished, and he took advantage of it, and that has proven itself. And they took a little bit of a risk on that because a lot of people said, well, how much of that was because of everything else happening in New Orleans and Cam Jordan, all these other guys, and how much of those sacks that he got where it's the breakout year because of created by others. And they looked at it and they said, that's not what we see. We believe in this guy. And boy, has he proven to be every bit of that. He has been in every metric you look at it, pressures, win percentage, sacks, whatever you care about when it comes to an edge rusher, he's in the top 5, top 3, whatever it is. He's been great. And that has been helped by others. So I think people have certainly come around on that, but a lot of people were sad to see Carl Lawson go because they liked him. As far as what they're doing different, I just think they're more multiple. They have the ability to do different things. They have a lot of guys who are good at both up front, at both stopping the run and getting after the pass. Larry Ogunjobi doesn't get talked about enough. They've moved him into a 3-tech rule where he's he's more of supposed to be in a pass rusher spot, but his background is as a great run stopper too. So teams really struggle to run the ball against them. Sam Hubbard's one of the best at that in the league too, is setting an edge on D that way. And so they've really kind of been able to do that, and then also have waves of guys they bring in different pass rush sets that have helped. And when Chidobe Awuzie comes in and plays above the head, you thought he was going to be something. You've got a number 1 in him. And, Mike Hilton comes in and brings you great energy at the slot position, maybe above what you even thought you were going to get from him. And they quickly come together. I don't think people thought it would come together this fast. That they would be legit. I think there's still questions about them against the league's best offense, most notably how they will look against a quarterback like Herbert. But I do think they've proven a foundational level of being good to very good against most teams.
I want to correct myself. It was 73-23 that they've outscored the Steelers and Raiders the last 2 weeks, which is crazy. And you mentioned Herbert in the Chargers. What are they saying about the Bolts coming to Cincinnati, Paul?
I think this is, and I kind of actually wrote about this in the Athletic today. It's a proving ground for the defense. It's judgment day for this defense. They have only faced 2 teams in the top 10 in DVOA offensively this year. Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers, who Devontae Adams had a record day, over 200 yards receiving against them. And Minnesota way back in week 1, who put up a bunch of points, 24 and 25 points combined. They've kind of made a living throttling the bottom tier of the offenses in the league. And that's great. You got to be able to do that. But we don't really know who they are defensively against this type of an offense. And what everyone's saying is, how are they going to look? We talked to Jesse Bates on Wednesday, and he said, it seems like most teams we've played have had one problem to deal with. Whether it's the back out of the backfield or this one receiver. We haven't faced a lot of teams with all the problems to deal with, like the Chargers bring to town. And I think there's a question of, the Bengals offense will put up points, should put up points the way they're rolling, some of the struggles the Chargers defense have had. Can this defense hold the Chargers from winning this game in a shootout? I say maybe, probably. We don't really know. I think that's kind of what people are looking at when you look at Sunday's game.
Paul, when we bring teams in, we kind of know where they're going to attack the offensive line. With Balaga down and Ibushi out, it's just been the right side. And this last week, with a backup guard on the left side now, Calamete, they just came straight up the middle. The Broncos were super successful, rushing just 4. So if you can, let's do both of kind of both lines here. One, what have you noticed? Where's been the most effective pass rush? Is it interior that's pushing guys outside into the hands of Hendrickson? Is it Hendrickson that is just straight disruptive? And then on the other line, that is really just kind of the one blemish on offense for the Bengals is the amount of sacks that Burrow has taken. Is that line still leaky? Are there issues there that you think Bosa and company could exploit, and where would that be?
On defense, I think it's a bunch of nice complementary pieces around Hendrickson as the hammer. DJ Reader doesn't get enough credit. He pushes the pocket back every time, so quarterbacks can't step up. Ogunjobi too. Hubbard has been back in there, and he's in the mix, and he cleans up a lot of stuff, and he's just around. And again, hemming the pocket in. And then because everybody knows with Hendrickson coming around that edge is going to do a lot of the finishing, and he does flush a lot of things to other guys. They do a good job of everyone doing enough. There's really no spot that's never getting pressure, or they're never bringing it up the middle. They've had games where the middle has been a dominant force, and they've had games where it's just been coming off the edges. On the offensive line, I think in pass pro, there's still issues there. Jonah Williams has been really good on the edge. Riley Reif has been who you'd expect him to be, a 10-year vet who looks the same every year. He's kind of been that. It's been about the interior, Trey Hopkins at center. Hakeem Adeniji, they feel like they've started to find something because he came in and entered the equation at right guard 3 weeks ago, but that's been kind of a rotating area. Quentin Spain's really good at left guard. Really, that right guard center spot is where you see a lot of the main issues stem from. And so if teams can take advantage of that, if you've got somebody who can line up over that spot, that's where a lot of it comes from. And Burrow is still under pressure a decent amount, but I think that was a big part of their adjustment into this. Let's focus Mixon, is let's not put ourselves in these spots. And if we can really get this running game going, we stay in third and manageable. We don't have to do third and long. And then, everything we do still is kind of taking teams a little bit more by surprise. And that's when Burrow just owns people. So it's kind of been that combination of why they made that adjustment, just have a fewer, less opportunities for teams to really tee off.
This is the first matchup between Burrow and Herbert. It was Tyrod Taylor in week 1 last year. So this will be a treat to just
a real barn burner.
What was the final? Like 16-13?
16-13. Randy Bullock's Cavs he said they seized up as he missed like a chip shot field goal at the end.
He was rubbing his belly.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, last thing for me. Based on everything you've seen from the Bengals recently and knowing what you know about the Chargers, what do you think could decide this one on Sunday?
I think what I said earlier, I think it's how many points can this Chargers offense put up? Is this Bengals defense real? How much can they limit a guy with the ability of Herbert? Is it going to look like what Green Bay did when Green Bay was throwing it all over them? I think that's going to be the difference. I think the Bengals will score. I think it's going to come down to, how effective is Herbert? Two guys with a lot of picks this year playing against each other. Mm-hmm. Burrow and Herbert have both thrown a ton of picks. Which team is the beneficiary of those? And, like most games, turnovers play such a huge role. But I think when you consider how much it has been a storyline for these two quarterbacks, who throws the most of them might be a big part of it too.
You still have Baltimore and Cleveland on the schedule. Last thing from me, Paul. You think this team wins? I think they're the best team in the division. Do you think they win the division?
I do. They're the healthiest by a long shot. I think they have the best quarterback right now and the best offense right now. I mean, everybody else has looked questionable, and it's all in their hands. They have Baltimore coming here on December 26th. They win that game, and they're as long as they stay up with Baltimore, they're in the division. I think the Browns and Steelers are in for a deep slide and going to fall out of it. So it's going to be those two teams, and I do think they're the better team. There's been a lot more games where you've wondered how the heck Baltimore won that game than there have been with Cincinnati, and I think they're the better team, but long way to go still.
Paul Dehner Jr., man, I love having you on. Always great insight. Appreciate in advance the food wrecks you're going to hook us up with when we get to Cincinnati.
Absolutely, we'll send you down over the Rhine, and you'll live a good life. Trust me.
There we go.
All right, brother. We'll see you at the stadium on Sunday.
Sounds good. Have a good one, guys.
Thanks, Paul.
All right, Money. I love having Paul on. He's been on a few times, and he knows his stuff. He knows his Bengals.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, look, it's one of those weird sort of quirks in the schedule, right? Because of where you finish, you play an opponent in a particular division if they finish in the same slot as you. So I think this is the third time we've seen the Bengals in 4 years. If my clock is right, I'm pretty sure that's what it is. So back-to-back years, both in Cincinnati, which for, whatever. It's just the way the schedule works out. Last year it worked out for him. Weird non-call in the end zone and then a missed field goal. But like I think Paul said it best, turnovers, capitalizing off turnovers. And I'm with them. I think we're going to see a lot of fireworks. I think this is going to be an offensive contest. And you know what? That'll be exciting. It'll be fun to watch, two teams get after it. The number 1 pick, the number 6 pick, and 2 of the best quarterbacks that we've seen come into the league in a long time.
The stretch here, you beat the Steelers, you lose to the Broncos. If you're the Chargers, you got to get this one against the Bengals. If you want to stay in the mix there in this wide open AFC money. I mean, I've never seen it like this before. 6, 7, 8 wins, almost the entire conference has it. And this is a game where if you don't keep up, you're going to get left behind.
Yeah, and you know what? Let's go Broncos. Get the Broncos to knock off the Chiefs. If the Chargers can get that win, and now you got a 3-way tie atop the division. In terms of record, I don't even know who the Raiders are playing, but we always cheer for them to lose. So
the Washington football team.
There you go. Let's go. Let's go Heineke. Let's go. Let's get it. So that's the other thing I think that can be the caveat. Yeah, if they don't get this win, they've already beat the Chiefs in Arrowhead. They've already beat the Raiders. They have an opportunity to play the Broncos back at home. If you can then sweep the Chiefs, sweep the Raiders, split with the Broncos, probably still a good chance you still have a very good chance to win the division. So that's the good thing, is that the Chiefs have not run away with this thing, and are going to post a 15-2 record or something like that. It's still there for the taking, but winning this game and continuing their alternating win-loss the last 5 weeks is going to definitely be beneficial, especially with the Giants coming out to LA on the back end.
Well, I know for the team and for fans and everybody, I mean, we're in December and it means something, right? So meaningful football in December, it's all you can ask for. So, all right, guys, that's going to do it for us. Be sure to download and subscribe to the Chargers Podcast Network, wherever you listen to podcasts. Running for History, Episode 5, out on Friday as we wrap up this 6-part series commemorating LT's single-season touchdown record. We'll see you in Cincinnati. For Matt Money Smith, I'm Chris Hayre.